Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! Lockers slammed shut and excited chatter filled the air. But amidst the chaos, one flyer pinned to the bulletin board caught the eye of a visitor who didn't quite belong. Annual Rosewood Talent Showcase. It proclaimed in swirling script. Open to all students. Let your light shine. A slender hand reached out, fingers tracing the embossed letters. The nails were bitten short, knuckles calloused from years of building sets and rigging lights in the shadows of school productions. Jet Carson swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing beneath the collar of a borrowed blouse. "You sure about this?" His twin sister, Daisy, whispered, glancing nervously down the hall. "If Mom and Dad find out?" "They won't," Jet assured her, though his voice lacked conviction. He tore his gaze from the flyer, meeting Daisy's concerned eyes, a mirror of his own. "This is my chance, Daisy. You know how long I've wanted this." Daisy's shoulders slumped in resigned agreement. "I know, but pretending to be me? Entering an all-girls talent show? It's risky, Jet." "It's the only way," he countered, voice low and determined. "Dad would never let me audition for the community theater. This is as close as I can get." The warning bell rang, startling them both. Daisy grabbed her brother's arm, tugging him toward an empty classroom. Once inside, she shut the door and leaned against it, arms crossed. "Okay, genius, walk me through this master plan of yours." Jet paced the room, fingers combing through his recently shortened hair, now an exact match to Daisy's chin-length bob. "It's simple. I come to your rehearsals as your visiting cousin. I learn the routines, practice at home. Then, on show night, I step in as you." "And how exactly do you plan to pull that off? In case you haven't noticed, we're not actually identical." A grin spread across Jet's face as he reached into his backpack. "That's where these come in." He pulled out a small makeup bag and a pair of foam inserts. A little contouring, some strategic padding, and voila, Jet becomes Daisy 2.0. Daisy's eyes widened. "Where did you even get those?" "Drama club discount at the costume shop," Jet replied with a wink. "Being the lighting tech has its perks." "This is insane," Daisy muttered, but Jet could see the spark of excitement in her eyes. She'd always been his partner in crime, his biggest supporter in the face of their parents' rigid expectations. "Maybe," Jet conceded. "But it's also my only shot. You know what Mom and Dad are like. It's all about grades and college applications. They don't see acting as a real career." Daisy's expression softened. "I know, and I hate seeing you give up on your dreams." She hesitated, then nodded decisively. "All right, I'm in, but we do this smart, no risks, no slip-ups." Relief flooded through Jet. He crossed the room in 2 strides, enveloping his sister in a tight hug. "Thank you," he whispered fiercely. "I won't let you down." "You better not," Daisy replied, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "Because if we get caught, I'm throwing you under the bus faster than you can say stage left." Jet laughed, the sound mingling with the muted bustle of the hallway beyond. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope. This was his chance to prove to himself, and maybe, someday, to his parents, that his passion wasn't just a hobby. It was who he was meant to be. The real challenge began the following week. Jet found himself in uncharted territory, perched on a hard plastic chair in Rosewood's stuffy auditorium. All around him, girls chattered and stretched, a sea of plaid skirts and regulation white blouses. He tugged self-consciously at the hem of his own borrowed uniform, hyper-aware of every difference between himself and the actual students. "Settle down, ladies!" Mrs. Fitzgerald, the drama teacher, clapped her hands for attention. Let's begin with some vocal warm-ups. Remember, projection is key. Jet's heart raced as he joined in the silly tongue twisters and scale runs. His voice cracked embarrassingly on a high note, drawing curious glances from nearby girls. He ducked his head, cheeks burning. "New girl's got some pipes," a tall redhead commented, not unkindly. "You auditioning for a singing part?" "Oh, no," Jet stammered, pitching his voice higher. "Just here to, support my cousin, Daisy Carson?" The girl's eyebrows rose. "Daisy? I didn't know she had a cousin. You two could be twins!" Jet forced a laugh, silently cursing his lack of foresight. "Yeah, we get that a lot. Family resemblance, you know?" Before the conversation could continue, Mrs. Fitzgerald called for volunteers to demonstrate their talents. Jet shrank back in his seat, content to observe. He watched in awe as girls performed monologues, sang arias, and executed flawless dance routines. The raw talent on display was intimidating, but it only fueled his determination. As the weeks progressed, Jet threw himself into preparation. He practiced Daisy's chosen monologue, a comedy piece from Twelfth Night, until he could recite it in his sleep. Hours were spent in front of the mirror, perfecting the subtle art of contouring to soften his jawline and accentuate his cheekbones. The foam inserts became a constant companion, hidden away in his school bag. At home, the pressure mounted. Dinner conversations revolved around SAT scores and college applications, with pointed comments about wasting time on frivolous pursuits. Jet bit his tongue, knowing that soon he'd have a chance to prove them wrong. The night before the showcase, Jet lay awake in bed, his mind racing. Doubt crept in, whispering of all the ways this could go wrong. What if someone recognized him? What if he forgot his lines? What if... A soft knock interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Daisy slipped into the room, perching on the edge of his bed. "Can't sleep?" she asked softly. Jet shook his head, sitting up. "What if I'm making a huge mistake, Daze? Maybe Mom and Dad are right. Maybe I should just focus on practical things." Daisy's eyes flashed with anger. "Don't you dare! I've watched you light up on stage since we were kids. This is your passion, Jet. Don't let anyone take that away from you." Her fierce belief in him brought tears to Jet's eyes. "But what if I'm not good enough?" "Then you'll keep working at it," Daisy said firmly. "But you'll never know unless you try." She squeezed his hand. "Get some sleep, okay? Tomorrow's your big day." As Daisy slipped out, Jet felt a renewed sense of purpose. He'd come too far to back down now. Whatever happened tomorrow, he was going to give it his all. The next evening, chaos reigned backstage at Rosewood Academy. Girls rushed to and fro, applying last-minute touches to makeup and costumes. The air thrummed with nervous energy and the scent of hairspray. In a cramped dressing room, Jet stared at his reflection, barely recognizing himself. Daisy's uniform fit perfectly, and the strategic padding gave him curves in all the right places. His face was a work of art, contouring and subtle makeup, transforming his features into a softer, more feminine version of himself. Even his voice, after weeks of practice, had settled into a passable alto. "You've got this," he whispered to his reflection, trying to quell the butterflies in his stomach. A commotion near the stage door caught his attention. Jet's blood ran cold as he recognized his parents' voices. "But we have to see Daisy perform!" His mother's insistent tone carried clearly. "We rearranged our whole evening for this." Jet's mind raced. They weren't supposed to be here. Daisy had told them she had a minor role, nothing worth watching. He couldn't go on stage with them in the audience. They'd recognize him in an instant. Panic rising, Jet scanned the room for an escape route. His eyes landed on an open window leading to a small courtyard. Without a second thought, he hitched up his skirt and scrambled through, ignoring the startled gasps of his fellow performers. The cool night air hit him like a slap, clearing his head. He couldn't give up now, not when he was so close. But how could he perform with his parents watching? A hand grabbed his arm, nearly sending him into cardiac arrest. He whirled to find Daisy, her eyes wide with concern. "Jet! What are you doing out here? You're on in 10 minutes. "Mom and Dad are here," he hissed, gesturing wildly toward the auditorium. "I can't go on stage! They'll know it's me!" Daisy's face paled, but her jaw set with determination. "Okay, new plan. I'll distract them, get them out of the auditorium somehow. You focus on your performance." "But, no buts," Daisy cut him off. "This is your moment, Jet. Don't let fear rob you of it." She gave him a quick, fierce hug. "Break a leg, bro. I believe in you." Before Jet could protest further, Daisy disappeared back inside. He took a deep breath, steeling himself. She was right. He'd come too far to back down now. Slipping back through the window, Jet rejoined the other performers backstage. The stage manager was calling 5 minutes to curtain, her clipboard a flurry of activity. Jet closed his eyes, running through his monologue one last time. The lights dimmed, and the show began. Jet peeked through the curtains, scanning the audience. To his immense relief, his parents' seats were empty. Whatever Daisy had done, it had worked. As act after act took the stage, Jet's nervousness gave way to excitement. The energy of live performance, even from the wings, was intoxicating. This was where he belonged. "Next up," the MC announced, "Daisy Carson, performing a monologue from Shakespeare's Twelfth Night." Jet's heart leapt into his throat. This was it. He stepped onto the stage, blinking in the bright lights. The audience was a shadowy mass beyond the footlights, but he could feel their attention like a physical force. Taking a deep breath, Jet began to speak. The words flowed from him, no longer just memorized lines, but a living, breathing character. He lost himself in the role, in the joy of bringing words to life. As he delivered the final punchline, the audience erupted in laughter and applause. Jet's chest swelled with pride and exhilaration. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. Floating on cloud 9, Jet made his way backstage. Girls he barely knew congratulated him, praising his performance. For a moment, he forgot the deception, basking in the glow of a successful show. Reality came crashing back as he rounded a corner and came face to face with his parents. "There you are, Daisy," his mother exclaimed, pulling him into a hug. "We're so sorry we missed your performance. The car wouldn't start. Can you believe it?" Jet froze, his mind blank. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His father clapped him on the shoulder, pride evident in his eyes. "The other parents were raving about your monologue, said it was the highlight of the show." Thank you," Jet managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Guilt and confusion warred within him. This was the approval he'd always craved, but it was based on a lie. Before he could say anything more, Daisy appeared, slightly out of breath. "Mom, Dad, I see you met my cousin. Isn't she great?" Their parents' brows furrowed in confusion. "Cousin?" his mother repeated. "But we thought—" Jet's heart pounded as he watched the pieces start to fall into place. He braced himself for the inevitable explosion, for disappointment and anger to replace the pride in their eyes. But then something unexpected happened. His father laughed, a deep, genuine chuckle that Jet couldn't remember hearing in years. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, shaking his head in amazement. "You really had us going there, son." Jet's jaw dropped. You knew?" His mother's eyes softened. We suspected something was up when Daisy kept making excuses for us not to come, and then when we saw you on stage, well, a mother knows her own child. We thought it best to play along, his father added, to see where this was going. Tears pricked at Jet's eyes. I'm sorry for lying, he said softly. I needed to do this, to prove to myself that I could. His parents exchanged a look, years of unspoken communication passing between them. No, we're the ones who should be sorry, his mother said at last. We've been so focused on what we thought was best for your future. We didn't see how important this was to you. His father nodded solemnly. Your performance tonight. It was something special, Jet. We'd be fools to ignore that kind of talent and passion. Jet could hardly believe what he was hearing. Does this mean... It means we have a lot to talk about, his father said. But for now, let's celebrate. Both of our children are pretty incredible, wouldn't you say? As his parents pulled him and Daisy into a group hug, Jet felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The road ahead might not be easy, but for the first time, he felt like his dreams were within reach. The backstage area buzzed with post-show excitement, but Jet barely noticed. His mind whirled with the unexpected turn of events. His parents knew. They'd known all along, and yet they weren't angry. If anything, they seemed proud. Earth to Jet! Daisy's voice cut through his daze. She waved a hand in front of his face, grinning. You in there, Shakespeare? Jet blinked, focusing on his sister's familiar features. I can't believe it, he said softly. All this time I was so scared of them finding out, and they actually supported me. Daisy's smile softened. I told you they would come around eventually. They just needed to see you in action. But how did you know? Jet asked, his brow furrowing. You seemed just as surprised as I was. A mischievous glint appeared in Daisy's eyes. Let's just say I may have had a hand in their sudden change of heart. Remember when I said I was going to distract them? Understanding dawned on Jet's face. You didn't. Oh, but I did, Daisy replied, looking entirely too pleased with herself. I may have cornered them outside and given them a piece of my mind. Told them exactly how talented you are, how hard you've worked, and how much this means to you. Jet's throat tightened with emotion. Daisy, thank you. I don't know what to say. She punched his arm lightly. Don't get all mushy on me now. Besides, I had a vested interest. If you become a famous actor, think of all the perks I'll get as your twin sister. Jet laughed, the sound tinged with relief and joy. I think you're getting a bit ahead of yourself there. Am I? Daisy raised an eyebrow. Because from where I'm standing, this looks like the beginning of something pretty amazing. Before Jet could respond, a small crowd of Rosewood students approached, chattering excitedly. There you are! The redhead from rehearsals exclaimed. We've been looking everywhere for you. That performance was incredible! Jet felt a moment of panic, acutely aware that he was still in full Daisy disguise. But to his surprise, the girls didn't seem to notice or care about the discrepancy. Thanks, he said, pitching his voice higher out of habit. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Enjoyed it? We were blown away, another girl chimed in. Have you thought about auditioning for the spring musical? You'd be perfect for the lead. Jet's heart raced at the possibility. A lead role in a real production, not just a talent show act. It was everything he'd ever dreamed of. I'll definitely think about it, he managed, trying to keep the excitement out of his voice. As the girls continued to shower him with praise and encouragement, Jet caught sight of his parents standing a short distance away. They were watching the scene unfold with matching expressions of pride and amusement. His father caught his eye and gave a subtle nod, as if to say, "We'll talk about this." But there was no anger in his gaze, only a newfound respect and perhaps a touch of regret for not recognizing Jet's passion sooner. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and farewells. As the auditorium emptied and the last of the set was struck, Jet found himself alone on the dimly lit stage. He closed his eyes, savoring the lingering energy of the performance. "So," a voice called from the wings, startling him. "What's next for the rising star?" Jet turned to see Mrs. Fitzgerald, the drama teacher, emerging from the shadows. Her expression was knowing, a hint of a smile playing at her lips. "Mrs. Fitzgerald, I can explain," Jet began, but she held up a hand to stop him. "No need, Mr. Carson. Or should I say, Miss Carson?" Her eyes twinkled with amusement. "I've been teaching drama for 30 years. Did you really think I wouldn't notice a boy in my all-girls showcase?" Jet's shoulders slumped in defeat. "I'm sorry for deceiving you. I needed this opportunity so badly." To his surprise, Mrs. Fitzgerald laughed. "Oh, my dear boy. Do you think you're the first student to go to extreme lengths for a chance to perform? I once had a girl hide in the trunk of my car to sneak into an out-of-town audition." Relief washed over Jet. "So, you're not angry?" "Angry? Heavens no, I'm impressed." She fixed him with a piercing gaze. "Talent is one thing, Jet, but dedication? The willingness to take risks for your art? That's what separates the hobbyists from the true performers." Jet straightened, feeling a surge of pride. "Thank you, Mrs. Fitzgerald. That means a lot coming from you." She nodded, then pulled a folded paper from her pocket. "Now, about that spring musical I mentioned earlier. Auditions are in 2 weeks. I expect to see you there. As yourself this time." Jet took the flyer with trembling hands. "I'll be there," he promised. "No disguises necessary." As Mrs. Fitzgerald turned to leave, she paused, glancing back over her shoulder. "Oh, and Jet? You might want to work on your falsetto. It was the only thing that gave you away." With a wink, she disappeared into the wings, leaving Jet alone once more. He looked down at the audition flyer, then out at the empty auditorium. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The drive home was filled with a nervous energy. Jet sat in the back seat, still in his Daisy disguise, while his parents spoke in low tones up front. Daisy squeezed his hand reassuringly, a silent promise that whatever happened, they were in this together. As they pulled into the driveway, Jet's father cleared his throat. "Why don't we all have a chat in the living room?" Jet's stomach churned. This was it, the moment of truth. He followed his family inside, perching on the edge of the sofa as if ready to bolt at any moment. His mother spoke first, her voice gentle but firm. "Jet, honey, we owe you an apology." Of all the things Jet had expected to hear, that wasn't one of them. He blinked in surprise, unable to form words. "We've been so focused on what we thought was best for your future," she continued, "that we didn't stop to consider what truly makes you happy." His father nodded solemnly. "Watching you on that stage tonight, it was like seeing you come alive in a way we've never witnessed before. We'd be fools to ignore that kind of passion and talent." Jet's eyes stung with unshed tears. "So, you're not disappointed in me?" "Disappointed?" His father's brow furrowed. "Son, we couldn't be more proud. It takes guts to pursue your dreams, especially in the face of opposition, even if that opposition came from us." "We just want you to be happy and successful," his mother added. "And after tonight, it's clear that acting isn't just a hobby for you. It's a calling." Daisy, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, spoke up. "Does this mean you'll let Jet audition for real shows now? No more sneaking around?" Their parents exchanged a look, years of unspoken communication passing between them. "We have conditions," his father said at last. "Your grades can't slip, and we want to see a practical backup plan. Maybe a minor in business or education along with your theater studies." "But," his mother interjected, a smile spreading across her face, "if you're willing to meet us halfway, then yes, we'll support your pursuit of acting." Joy bubbled up in Jet's chest, threatening to overwhelm him. "Really? You mean it?" His father's eyes crinkled with amusement. "Just promise us one thing, son." "Anything," Jet breathed. "Next time you decide to cross-dress for a performance, give us a heads up. Your mother nearly had a heart attack when she realized it was you up there and not Daisy." The tension in the room broke as laughter filled the air. Jet felt lighter than he had in years, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. As the laughter subsided, Daisy nudged him. "So, brother dear, what's your next move, now that you're out of the proverbial acting closet?" Jet's mind raced with possibilities. The spring musical auditions, community theater productions, maybe even summer stock if he could swing it. For the first time, the future seemed bright with opportunity rather than weighted down by expectations. "Well," he said, a grin spreading across his face, "I hear there's a production of Twelfth Night coming up at the community center. Seems fitting, don't you think?" His parents groaned good-naturedly at the reference to his showcase piece, but their eyes shone with pride. "Whatever you choose," his mother said warmly, "we'll be there to cheer you on. No more missed performances." As the conversation turned to logistics and future plans, Jet caught Daisy's eye. She gave him a subtle thumbs up, her expression saying, "I told you so." Jet leaned back, basking in the glow of acceptance and possibility. The road ahead might not be easy, but for the first time, he felt like he was on the right path. His path. And with his family's support, there was no telling how far he could go. The next morning, Jet woke early, his mind still buzzing with the events of the previous night. He padded downstairs, drawn by the scent of coffee and the low murmur of voices from the kitchen. To his surprise, he found his parents already up, heads bent over a stack of papers spread across the table. They looked up as he entered, matching smiles on their faces. "Morning, superstar," his father greeted him. "Sleep well?" Jet nodded, still marveling at the easy acceptance in his father's tone. "What's all this?" he asked, gesturing to the paperwork. His mother pushed a mug of coffee towards him. "Well, if you're serious about pursuing acting, we figured we should start looking into options. Theater programs, summer workshops, that sort of thing." Warmth bloomed in Jet's chest. They were really doing this, supporting him, helping him chase his dreams. It almost felt too good to be true. Wow, thank you," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. His father clapped him on the shoulder. "Don't thank us yet. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. But we're in this together now, all right?" Jet nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He sat down, pulling one of the brochures towards him. "Prestigious theater program seeks young talent," the headline proclaimed. As they pored over the materials, discussing possibilities and making plans, Daisy wandered in, still in her pajamas. Well, she yawned, eyeing the scene before her. "Looks like the Carson family players are in full swing already." Jet stuck his tongue out at her, but there was no real heat behind it. "Jealous?" Daisy snorted, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Please, I'll leave the spotlight to you, dear brother. I much prefer being the power behind the throne." Their mother raised an eyebrow. And what exactly does that mean? A mischievous grin spread across Daisy's face. Well, someone's got to manage Jet's career when he makes it big. Might as well be the person who knows all his embarrassing childhood stories. Hey! Jet protested, but he was laughing too hard to sound indignant. As the morning wore on, filled with laughter and excited planning, Jet felt a sense of rightness settle over him. This was how it was supposed to be. His passion embraced, his family united in support. Later that afternoon, Jet found himself back at Rosewood Academy, this time openly as himself. He'd come to thank Mrs. Fitzgerald properly and to officially sign up for the spring musical auditions. As he approached the drama room, he heard raised voices from within. Curious, he peered through the partially open door. Mrs. Fitzgerald stood at her desk, facing a red-faced man Jet recognized as the school's principal. "This is unacceptable, Margaret," the principal was saying. "A boy in our all-girls showcase? Do you have any idea of the scandal this could cause?" Mrs. Fitzgerald remained calm, a stark contrast to the principal's agitation. "With all due respect, Richard, I fail to see the problem. The audience loved his performance. No one even realized he wasn't one of our students until after the fact." "That's not the point," the principal sputtered. "We have rules, traditions, outdated traditions that stifle creativity and exclude talented performers." Mrs. Fitzgerald cut in smoothly. "Perhaps it's time we reconsider some of those rules." Jet's heart raced. They were arguing about him, about his performance. He felt a mixture of guilt and pride, guilt for causing trouble for Mrs. Fitzgerald, but pride that she was defending him so fiercely. The principal's next words made Jet's blood run cold. "I'm sorry, Margaret, but I have no choice. Unless you can guarantee this won't happen again, I'll have to cancel the spring musical. We can't risk another incident." Before he could think better of it, Jet pushed the door open. Both adults turned to stare at him, surprise evident on their faces. "I'm sorry," Jet said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I couldn't help overhearing, and I want you to know that this is all my fault. Mrs. Fitzgerald had no idea I wasn't a Rosewood student when I auditioned." The principal's eyes narrowed. "Young man, do you realize the seriousness of what you've done?" Jet straightened his spine, channeling every ounce of confidence he'd felt on stage the night before. "I do, sir, and I'm prepared to face any consequences. But please, don't punish the entire drama department because of my actions." Mrs. Fitzgerald stepped forward, placing a hand on Jet's shoulder. "Richard, if I may, this young man showed more dedication and talent than I've seen in years. Perhaps instead of punishment, we should be looking at this as an opportunity." The principal's brow furrowed. "An opportunity? For what, exactly?" A slow smile spread across Mrs. Fitzgerald's face. "To break new ground, to show that Rosewood Academy isn't just about maintaining traditions, but about fostering talent wherever we find it." Jet held his breath, watching the internal struggle play out on the principal's face. Finally, the older man sighed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "What exactly are you proposing, Margaret?" Mrs. Fitzgerald's eyes gleamed with triumph. "A collaboration. We open our spring musical auditions to the boys' school across town. Think of the publicity, the increased ticket sales. We could make it an annual event." The principal stroked his chin, considering. "It would certainly set us apart from other schools in the area." "Exactly." Mrs. Fitzgerald pressed her advantage. "And it all started because this young man had the courage to follow his passion. Rules be damned." Jet felt his cheeks heat at the praise, but he kept his gaze steady on the principal. After what felt like an eternity, the man nodded. "All right, Margaret. You've made your point. We'll try it your way, for this year. But if there's even a hint of trouble—" "There won't be," Jet interjected. "I promise, sir. This means everything to me. I won't let you down." The principal eyed him for a long moment, then nodded curtly. "See that you don't, young man. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some phone calls to make." As he left, Mrs. Fitzgerald turned to Jet with a wide smile. "Well done, Mr. Carson. I do believe you've just changed the course of Rosewood's theatrical history." Jet's knees felt weak with relief. "I can't believe that worked. Thank you for standing up for me, Mrs. Fitzgerald." She waved off his thanks. "You stood up for yourself, Jet. That's the most important thing. Now, I believe you came here for a reason?" Grinning, Jet pulled the audition form from his backpack. "Yes, ma'am. I'd like to sign up for the spring musical. As myself this time." Mrs. Fitzgerald took the form with a flourish. "Welcome aboard, Jet. Something tells me this is going to be a very interesting production indeed."
Thanks for watching, my girlies. Be sure to check out Patreon for more.